Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby, live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to Tuesday. The weekly top three, the deep dive, the weekly beatings will continue until morale improves segment of the program. No, we always joke around with Brad, but it's always good information. Maybe not the stuff we quite want to hear because, but it's got to be heard. And that's what it's all about today. We're diving straight into it, jumping right in this morning, getting ready to go. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, joins us this morning to discuss. Hello, my friend. How are you this morning?
That what is it? Cryon that you posted from Bill Brock was especially especially appreciated this morning.
Bill posted this morning in the chat room. Good morning, all you happy people. Oh, and Brad too. So yeah, it's like I think Brad is happy. It's just maybe this is his therapy. This is how he works out his angst about the world is by talking about all the stuff that's going on in the legislature. And boy, I got to tell you, Brad, there is some stuff going on, and a couple things. We're going to get into it with number two specifically, but there's some stuff. First and foremost, let's just get started. They just can't help themselves. They just can't stop. I'm talking about the legislature here. They just cannot help themselves. Give us the rundown here.
Well, Michael, we've seen the headlines sort of flash by over the past few weeks. The education bill, the big education bill, the biggest education bill in history, according to some who voted for it. We've seen Judy Colom's increase in child support, child care subsidies.
Right.
We've seen increases in various other things. Finally, last week we got a total. What we haven't seen as all of these spending bills have sort of flashed by, we haven't seen a total of where we are. And last week, Legislative Finance presented to Senate Finance. Alexi Painter from Legislative Finance presented to the Senate Finance Committee, sort of subtotaling where we've gotten to, and it was eye-opening. Just sort of shocking. So if you've got that chart, I want to sort of walk through that as a way of sort of educating people about where we are. This was one slide from Alexi's presentation that was an effort to sort of total where we are in terms of the budget. And this is the slide that talks about getting to a balanced budget. He starts with the fall revenue forecast of $6.31 billion. That is the combined total of the oil revenues, the little bit of taxes and fees that the state gets, and then all of the permanent fund of the POMV draw. He doesn't break out the PFD portion from the non-PFD portion. He just throws it all in there. And then he uses the governor's operating budget plus transfers, which is what the governor proposed in his budget, and the governor's amended capital budget, the two pieces of spending that the governor has proposed. And he subtracts those two from the fall revenue forecast and gets $1.3 billion remaining. Then, and this is the part that is important to pay attention to. Then he starts totaling up the legislation that is moving its way through both bodies, and adding to spending as we go. The first is SB 140, which has passed both bodies, is sitting on the governor's desk, and that's $241 million by the time they add it all in. And then he adds the senior benefits, which is what the Senate has passed. Interestingly enough, he doesn't add the $6 million for Representative Colom's bill to increase child care subsidies, but it's only $6 million. And so he gets the remainder after subtracting the legislation passed by the SB 140, the education bill, and the senior benefits. The remainder of the revenue remaining after the governor's operating budget, the governor's amended capital budget, SB 140, and the senior benefits bill is $1.0 billion, $1.04 billion. Then he takes away two additional items. One is the AEA grid project match. That is the state's portion, a portion of the state's portion of the match to the federal grant that AEA got, the Alaska Energy Agency, that AEA got to help bolster the rail belt electric grid. This is a portion of the state's match to that, $30 million. And then the AMHS shortfall,
Marine highway system.
Thank you. The Marine highway system. I was trying to think of the Marine highway system shortfall, and gets a remainder now of $969.3 million. This is after after overall revenues minus the governor's amended budget, minus the governor's amended capital budget, minus SB 140, minus senior benefits, minus the AEA grid project, and minus the Marine highway shortfall. Gets $969.3 million. Then he compares that to what that would mean in terms of a PFD. And this is the eye-opening part. We wouldn't even come close at $969.3 million. This is the way the Senate Finance does the math. We wouldn't even come close at $969.3 million to cover what they call the $2.3 billion cost of a statutory PFD. It wouldn't even come close to covering, again, what they call the $1.8 billion cost of a 50-50 POFD. Here's the fascinating part. At $969.3 million remaining after those deductions, it would barely, and this is the way the Senate Finance looks at it, it would barely cover the cost to them of a 25-75 PFD, or what they call 75-25, which is 75. They put the government first. I put Alaskans first, 25-75. They put the government first, 75-25. The cost of a 25-75 would be $914 million. The remaining, after what they call that cost of a 25-75 PFD, the remaining for the remaining surplus, if you will, would be $55 million, only $55 million. So after $6.3 billion in revenue, they only have, after all the spending is accounted for, they only have 969, all the spending that's passed or almost passed, they only have $969 million remaining. And after the POM, the 25-75, they view it as they only have $55 million remaining. Now, here's the trick. Here's the trick. There is the sheet that follows this has the remainder of the stuff that's sitting out there. So, for example, the governor has two bills that are sitting out there. One is his teacher bonus bill that he's now holding SB 140 for until he gets his teacher bonus bill. That would add $54.5 million. So if they layered that on top of the spending that they've already got, that they're already accounting for, then the PFD is gone.
That's all the money.
or the amount remaining. The amount remaining, the so-called
Right.
surplus is gone. Then there's the governor's, what he called the Alaska Affordability Act. We talked about that some last week, and that's the tax credit that the governor proposes to give to corporations for doing things like childcare for their employees and housing for their employees and other things to reduce the cost for their employees, corporations to reduce the cost for their employees. The cost of that in terms of reduced revenue, because it's a tax credit against taxes that otherwise are due from the corporations. The cost of that is another $237.6 million. So that wipes out the amount remaining. I mean, the teacher bonuses wipes out the amount remaining. And then the governor's Alaska Affordability Act wipes out another $237 million. So you're way below POMB 2575 at that point. And that's before this list goes on. That's before the legislative capital budget, the legislators' capital budget additions and district projects are included. It's before the additional amount that the University of Alaska asked for. It's before the Community Assistance Fund, the normal amount, statutory amount that's due the Community Assistance Fund. It's before deferred maintenance. It's before the Renewable Energy Fund. It's before school construction. It's before school major maintenance. If you add all of that in, particularly the governor's Alaska Affordability Act, the tax credit from the Alaska Affordability Act, you can wipe out most of that $914 million fairly quickly.
Wait, and you know what I don't see here anywhere? The defined benefits bill, which has passed the Senate. I noticed that they didn't include that in this number because they still don't know how much it's going to cost. They didn't like the initial cost estimates. They didn't like the backup. We're supposed to have had a fiscal note. Some are estimating that it could cost upwards of anywhere between $100 and $500 million a year. It's nowhere to be found in any of this.
What this tells you is they can't stop themselves. They just can't. Every little Representative Colom's bill in particular just comes to mind. Every little bill has their own, we need to have this. We need to have, increased subsidies for childcare. It's important to Alaska families. It's important to get, working mothers back in the workplace. It's important for a number of reasons. We need to have this. Bam, $6 million. Scott Kawasaki, we need to have the senior benefits bill. We need to support our seniors. We need to, they're the ones who've given in the past. They're the ones that we need to respect and honor and pay back in some form. Bam, another $23 million. SB 140, it's for the kids. We need to have K through 12. We need to support K through 12. Bam, $241 million. And the governor's as bad as the rest of them. We need to have the teacher bonuses. And I'm going to hold my breath or hold this bill, one of the two, until you incorporate the teacher bonuses. Bam, another $54 million. And then the governor's Alaska Affordability Act, the tax credits to corporations to essentially do government things, but through outsourcing government to the corporations. Bam, another $237 million. Teacher benefits, defined benefits. You're exactly right to add that on, Michael. Bam, another $100 million or 500 or whatever it is. It's just they can't stop themselves. And none of these, in the debate of none of these, are they talking about who pays, who's going to bear the burden of this, how are we going to fund it? We can't keep voting. We can't keep adding more and more and more and more and more. And, bam, they just keep passing. The Senate's worse than the House. But Representative Colom's bill shows that the House is trying to keep right there with them. And the SB 140, the education bill, is the House keeping right there with them. It's just, they can't stop themselves. And what it's doing, at one point, Stedman said POMB 2575, or in Stedman's terms, POMB 7525, because of course the government comes first. POMB 7525 is it. We can draw the line there. We're not going to go below that. Well, heck, you just add in the stuff they've already done or in the process of doing, and they're already within 55 million of it, within a hair's breadth of taking it away and going below it, and all of this additional stuff that's out there just flows right on. We'll just run that down even more. The government can't stop itself as long as once it broke into the PFD, just like once it broke into the statutory budget reserve and then broke into the constitutional budget reserve. Once it broke into the PFD, they're treating it like, another savings account, another kitty, another, thing we can dip into. And all of this stuff's important. Julie Colomb it's really for the kids, and it's just, they just can't stop themselves. And it's just, if we don't put a break on this somehow, and Ben Carpenter's HJR 7, which we'll talk about in the third segment, if we don't put a break on this somehow, it's just going to go all away. And we're already, statutory PFD is already, the way they do the calculations, statutory PFD is already gone 50-50. PFD is just, somewhere in the past distance. And PFD 75 or POMV 2575 is approaching the same status as those two, statutory PFD and the POMV 50-50. And one last, it's the governor that's adding to this. It's the governor. It's not just the House. It's not just the House coalition. It's not just the Senate. It's the governor that's adding to this in terms of the teacher bonuses and the Alaska Affordability Act.
This whole thing, again, as you said, is just they can't help themselves. They just continue to go in the same direction over and over again. I guess I'm just astonished again to watch this over and over again, to see this happen and to know exactly how this is going to break out in the long run, which basically means the PFD is going to be gone. And by the way, the capital budget is supposed to be like 30% of the overall budget. So if they added another 30% on top of that, or even half that, 15% of the budget in capital expenditures, that $900 million is definitely gone at that point. Brad Keithley is our guest. The Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the Michael Dukes Show. Common Sense Radio. Back with more after this.
Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Sorry, we were up against a break there. We were a little hard. Brad, I'm just looking at these numbers. And again, this is, legislation passed by one or both bodies. And it's just, to me, the glaringly obvious fact is that they kept the defined benefits spending out of this. Now, maybe it's because, we didn't have a number. But again, Donna mentions it in here. Reason Magazine, the Reason Foundation, not magazine, but Reason Foundation, who came in and testified on it, said it could cost almost $10 billion. Now, I think that was over a 10-year period. I asked Donna how long, but I think it's over a 10-year period. Yeah. But that's $1 billion a year. That in and of itself would suck up all the available money left over by the PFD. I mean, it just, they cannot stop. And I don't even know how you point it out to them and they're just like, no, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Nothing bad possibly could happen here. Again, hold my beer while I shovel coal into the train as we go for the bridge.
They don't feel constraints. I mean, everybody has a pet project. I mean, we saw this all the way back in 2019, right? When the governor couldn't even get 16 to back up his vetoes. Everybody has a pet project, and everybody has a story behind their pet project, and everybody has a constituency behind their pet project. I mean, the governor's pet project is the teacher bonuses and the Alaska Affordability Act. What a horrible, horrible piece of legislation. Everybody has their pet projects, and they all have a story behind it, and they all have a constituency behind it, and they put it on the floor, and nobody wants to vote against it. I mean, nobody wanted to vote against Judy Colomb's child care subsidy bill. Nobody wants to vote against senior benefits. Oh my God, we can't vote against seniors. Nobody wants to vote against K through 12, which at one point was the bare minimum we possibly could do. And it's below the bare minimum we possibly could do. And then it passes, and all of a sudden it's the biggest education bill in the state's history. I mean, it's just they can't stop themselves. And the failure here or the challenge here that Ben Carpenter is trying to correct. But the money is just sitting there. It's just, the PFD is supposed to be for the people, but it's just sitting there. It's in their reach. And the court told them they could take it. And they just can't stop themselves from taking it and converting it from a program that has the largest positive impact on Alaska families, is fair to all Alaska families. They just can't help dipping into that and focusing it on their pet projects. And it keeps, it just keeps on going.
This is the expansion of Parkinson's principle, Parkinson's law, which basically says, spending expands to consume all available resources. If it's there, they're going to spend it. And that's exactly where we're at. Spending is going to expand to consume every available resource that's out there. And then some. I mean, and your next one, oh, I was so furious after reading this last one from this. I've never heard of the guy. He apparently is a hack, perfectly positioned to espouse and parrot every view that we've heard from every anti-PFD person in the world. I know we're going to get this. I know we're going to get this in the next segment, but I read this and the more I read it, the angrier I got as I went through this thing. Just this screed of elitism and everything else. It really. It goes hand in glove with the first one.
It does. And the only way to stop this, Michael, I mean, I say it in ways that upset people sometimes, but the only way to stop this is to stop the revenue. And the only way to stop the revenue is to make all Alaskans contribute to it. As long as we've got some Alaskans a big segment of Alaskans that don't have to contribute revenue, can just watch this spending go on without any harm to them, they don't care.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're jumping back into it. The weekly top 3 continues. I know some of you just crashed off of Facebook. I don't know what happened, but keep going. We'll keep rolling. Here we go. Jumping back in. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do it. Here we go.
Brad Keithley joins us every week to discuss oil, gas, and the economic forecast of Alaska. It's the Michael Duke Show.
All right, Brad Keithley continues with us, the weekly top 3. This is number 2 of the weekly top 3. And I got so angry, almost punched my monitor. I was so upset about this. The second one is the feature. It's an opinion piece from Al Balea in the ADN, and apparently he's a visiting professor, ex-oil and gas employee, just doing a leadership trainer. I mean, if that's the kind of leadership course this guy teaches, I definitely don't want to be attending his courses. Talking about means testing for the PFD, but that's just part of it. This whole thing. Go ahead, Brad. I'll let you go on it.
No, you're on a roll.
Well, this guy. I mean, look, this whole thing. As we read through this opinion piece, there's a couple things that just stood out for me. Talking about. That we're just pretending not to know the only reason that we would increase taxes to be able to pay the dividend. Not one word in here about the size and scope of government. It's like it's totally tone deaf as to what's going on with the spend in the state. As long as the money's being spent, I don't care. Hey, as long as everybody else is paying, I don't care. That's literally what I got out of this.
Yeah. So I know Al. It's Al Balea. And Al, at one time, was president of BP's oil pipelines in Alaska, and had went on and did other things for BP, and then retired, and among other things, has taught leadership courses and got himself a job over at UAA teaching leadership courses there as well. And it is elitist. I mean, that's sort of Al. It is elitist, and it's look, we all know the PFD is just a welfare program, and so let's focus it on the lower income Alaska families, and we'll take the rest of it for government because we know how to spend it better. Government knows how to spend it better, use it better than anybody else. It's that sort of tone. Here's I've delved into this. Is not the first time Al's written this article. He wrote it a year ago in response to Matt Berman's piece that called the PFD attacks or PFD cuts attacks, and talked about a better way to raise revenue than through PFD cuts, a much lower impact way, a much fairer way to Alaska families. Al wrote essentially this same piece as a response in the ADN when Matt wrote his piece. And I delved into it because I was interested in the numbers. What do the numbers actually look like? Here's the deal, Michael. The deal is our deficits are so big that you'd have to wipe out not only the PFD to the top 20%, but largely to the top 50% and maybe the top 60% in order to balance the budget, in order to balance the budget where we are now and have something left over for lower income families. So not only is Al talking about talking about, wiping out the PFD to the top 20% to the upper income, he's talking about wiping out the PFD largely to middle income Alaska families as well to balance the budget. And it doesn't end there. I mean, as you look at budget growth, which we do, if you look at the 10-year forecast, it gradually starts eating away at low income Alaska families too. And it gets easier for the legislature to eat away at it by saying, well, it's a welfare. We've turned it into a welfare program. It's now a welfare program. We can't afford this generous welfare program. And so we either need to reduce the population to which it goes further, or we need to cut the level of the PFD further. And it just gradually drags down the program that way. So it doesn't even ultimately protect low-income Alaska families. Here's the final deal. And Al knows this, and yet he writes these columns. What it really is a protection plan for the top 20%. What happens is they give up their PFDs. Essentially they say, okay, we're going to give up our PFDs and concentrate them on they say middle and lower income, but what they really mean is the lower half of Alaska families. And we'll give up our PFD. When we start talking about taxes in the future, they'll say, hey, we already gave up ours. We already gave up our PFD. So you can't tax us. You can't tax the top 20%. It's cheap insurance for the top 20%. It caps their tax liability at the cost of their PFD, which is like 0.5% of the top 1%. Even though PFD cuts take 20% of the income of the average low income Alaska family, 10% of the average low middle income Alaska family, they take only 0.5% of the top 1% of Alaska families. But it caps their liability. So they get insurance against ever paying taxes by saying, look, we gave up our PFD. That was our contribution. You now need to take whatever additional money you need out of low income Alaska families. And ultimately wipes out the PFD that way. It is a very cynical approach by the top 20% to try to buy insurance to keep their liability, their share of government costs down. And it's all the other things that got called. This proposal in some form got put on the floor during the House debate on amendments on HJR 7. A couple of representatives put out proposals that were essentially means testing. And Jamie Allard called it discriminatory, that you just want to give the PFD to some Alaskans, not all Alaskans. It's all Alaskans' share of the wealth, but you're trying to take it away from some Alaskans. It's all those things, but it's also just a charade in terms of what it's going to accomplish. It's not going to accomplish what they think it's going to accomplish. The PFD will continue to be eaten away. It's really, at the end of the day, it's just a very cynical way for the top 20% to try to cap their tax liability.
I love how Zach Fields also threw an amendment in there that would make unemployed residents ineligible for the PFD, which immediately just, if you're 18 years old and you're unemployed, so if you're living at home, or if you're a housewife or a house dad, one of the two, you would be ineligible because you chose to stay home to work or to take care of your kids or whatever else it is. Or maybe you're just unemployed at the time. You just couldn't get your PF. I mean, it's just like every turn, let's take money from people who can least afford it.
Yeah. There's a lot of limousine liberals. A lot of the liberals in this state are limousine liberals, right? I mean, it's tax somebody. Don't tax me. Do all these programs, have all these programs, these spending programs, these social programs, but don't tax me to pay for it. I don't want to pay for it. Make somebody else pay for it. And Zach certainly is the leader of the pack in terms of he in the House and Matt Clayman in the Senate are certainly the leaders of the pack in terms of being limousine liberals. Tax somebody else other than me. But Al's right in there with them. I mean, Al's it's had this debate with somebody who truly thought means testing was the right way to go. And they present themselves as, I'm really concerned about middle income and lower income Alaska families. I really want to concentrate this PFD on those families to make sure that they have, something that they have some support, some income support. But once you sort of blow through that and say, well, it wouldn't reach middle income Alaska families because the deficit's too big, and you're gradually going to eat it away from lower income Alaska families also as you fund additional government programs. Once you blow through that and realize it's really a very cynical way for the top 20% to cap their tax liability, it becomes something that those who advocate it, I don't have much respect for.
Yeah. I mean, it's ultimately frustrating to watch this kind of thing. And then to tie that again back to your number one of the weekly top three, which is they just can't help themselves. I mean, does this madness stop? We're going to consume absolutely every dollar that's available. Oh, and we should just kill the PFD to take all that as well so that we can use that for I mean, at what point does he not realize, or does somebody not realize, based on the OMB projections and everything else, that not only will the PFD be gone, they'll be looking for even more money at that time.
Well, Al's hoping that the defense that the top 20% will be able to put in at that point is, hey, we already gave ours. We gave up our PFD a long time ago. Don't tax us. We gave up our PFD. We capped our liability. There was once a proposal around a few years ago. It said, we'll have a tax, but we'll cap it at the amount of the PFD. Well, that sounds good to start with, but then you realize the deficits are so big that the amount of revenue you need to raise to cover the deficits as a percent of income is much higher than the PFD is as a percent of income to the top 20%. And it's really, we'll cap the tax at the level of the PFD is really just a top 20%, a cynical top 20% ruse to try to dodge liability, the additional liability they've got for the increased spending, and push that liability off on middle and lower income Alaska families. This is just another, I mean, the means testing the PFD is just another way of trying to use of the old program of capping your tax liability at the level of the PFD.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top three continues. We've got number 3 coming up. Quick tease, 20 seconds.
Number 3 is HJR 7 still on the floor. There's concern about whether there's going to be the votes on the House side. There's serious concern about whether there will be votes on the Senate side for HJR 7. And so we've seen some proposals about, if not HJR 7, what else can we do for the PFD? And we're going to talk about those.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We continue in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, a bit of housekeeping just for a second. Everybody said they crashed off YouTube. Or off of Facebook. I actually got logged out of Facebook. Like my Facebook completely logged me out, crashed. I can't log in on my phone. Is anybody else having a hard time logging in on Facebook? I'd just like to know if this is a me problem or a you problem. I see the video is actually still up on Facebook because you can view it without logging in. But I'm concerned that all of a sudden, and it won't give me my authentication code to get back in. It says it can't send me a text right now for some reason. It completely logged me out. Can't get back in. Okay, so this is a Facebook wide problem. So if it logged you out of your Facebook, then I'm not nearly as concerned because I randomly, I guess being a public figure, I randomly get these requests where people are trying to reset my password on my Facebook or on my Microsoft account all the time. Like, did you request a password? No, I did not. Okay, we'll ignore it. Thank you. It happens all the time. So, okay, I just want to make sure Facebook and Instagram are down. Although, like I said, I can still view the video. It's up on the Facebook page as I'm logged out. I can see it running in the background. But anyway, one of those things. All right, so we're all good. That's not me. It's them.
This is a time to pitch the podcast, Michael.
This is the time. Yeah, this is the time to go back. And if you want to listen on the podcast, it's available wherever you find podcasts. Spotify is the easiest one, but Castbox, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you find it, you can go back and listen to it. And I know Brad snips these segments out, although you'll have to do it from YouTube today, or you normally do it from YouTube, because I got a notification. Somebody's using your copyrighted material. I'm like, what? And I look and it was Brad. So it was Brad could use it all he wants. That's fine. So, yeah. And yeah, I just got another text from somebody else that it logged them out of Facebook as well. So apparently Facebook is having a bad day. Having a bad day right now. All right. But yeah, Brad, look, I know this Alboy guy doesn't know me from Adam, and he probably doesn't even care what I'm saying, but my God, I read through this and I was just so agitated by the entire tone of this. And is this the elitism that all these people are feeling? Is this just a snapshot of all this elite? I mean, the whole thing. In all my years of teaching, I've never seen anything like this. The first is what I call pretending to know. The current example is pretending not to know that the state can no longer afford to pay a permanent fund dividend. And from then on, it just went downhill. And I'm just like, okay, we're just gonna spend all the dollars that we can, and nobody gets it. Nobody understands the history of the permanent fund. They don't understand the genesis and the reason for it. They don't understand any of that. It's all just government money, and it should just all be spent right now.
Yep, exactly right. I mean, that is the elitism. It is the elitism. It is, I'm not going to pay. And here's where it starts, Michael. I mean, they are bought into this proposition that Alaskans don't pay taxes, right? That's their starting point. And I don't want to pay taxes. In the top 20%, I don't want to pay taxes. And the fact that PFD cuts are a tax on Alaska families, they just don't happen to be a significant tax on the top 20%, but they are significant on middle and lower income Alaska families. The fact that they are a tax doesn't even cross their mind. It's government money. We're just redirecting it to another program. It used to be this welfare program for everybody. Yeah, we don't need that. We're going to redirect it to another program, and we're going to go on. And I'm not going to have to pay taxes. And there's no sense of responsibility. Al, Matt Clayman, Zach Fields, none of them have a sense of responsibility for the government they're creating. They have no sense of an interest in the size of government they're creating, because they don't have to pay for it.
Right. They don't care who pays. As long as my program gets funded, and this program's important. So as long as this program gets funded, it doesn't matter what it costs. We should pay it. And we being everybody else.
Exactly right. That's the second part. The first part is it should be funded, and B, I shouldn't have to pay for it because I should use somebody else's money. I should use PFD cuts. I should take it out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families to pay for it. Because we don't have taxes in Alaska. I mean, it's this gibberish of we don't have taxes. We need programs. There's this pot of money. Oh, I know it's important to some of you, but don't worry about that. because we'll create a program for you. If you have enough need after we take all your money, we'll create a program for you if we have any money left at that point. It's just, and the ones who are getting the really short end of the stick are the ones in the middle income bracket. Lower income Alaska families do have some programs that respond to their needs. Middle income Alaska families don't.
They got nothing.
And having the money taken out of their pockets is really the most egregious part of this.
The legislature drained Facebook of all their funds as well, says Bill, which is quite possible. If they had access to that, baby, I tell you, they would drain that one dry as well. All right, let's get back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe. Let's do it. Ding.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right, we're back. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It is the weekly top 3. We're done to number 3, which is HJR 7. If it's not now, then when is it? And if it's not this, then what is it? Brad, hit me with your story here.
So HJR 7 is probably the best bill that we've had on the floor in the last 10 years to try to out of control spending and to try to preserve the PFD. It's Ben Carpenter's, I was going to say Ben Cartwright. I go back to the Bonanza days. Ben Carpenter's, when you're old, it's tough, Michael. Sometimes what
are you talking about?
Ben Carpenter's bill to create a constitutional amendment to protect the PFD. Probably the best chance we've had to control spending and to preserve the PFD we've had on the floor in the last 10 years. And the reason it controls spending is it takes money out of the legislature's pocket and it takes it off the table in terms of what the legislature can spend. It directs it to be distributed as PFDs in accordance with the statute, whatever the statute is at any given point in time, and takes that money away from the legislature. And as the first segment showed us, money needs to be taken away from the legislature because they can't control themselves. They just keep spending it and spending it and spending it. And Ben's HJR 7 is also important because it preserves the PFD program. It preserves Governor Hammond's original vision that a portion of the state's commonly owned wealth should be distributed directly to Alaska residents, as opposed to funneled by government through 20 plus 21 plus 11 plus 1, wherever they want to direct it, the special interests that they want to direct it to. It should be distributed, a portion of it should be distributed broadly. And it protects that vision as well. Probably the most important bill we've had in the legislature from this standpoint in the last 10 years. It was supposed to be on the House floor last week, and it got pulled. It was supposed to last Wednesday, and it got pulled. It was supposed to be on the House floor last Friday. It got pulled. It was supposed to be on the House floor yesterday. It got pulled. And there's some speculation that the reason it keeps being pulled is it's short of the votes. It needs 2/3 of the vote in both bodies to be adopted and to go out to the people as a constitutional amendment. Even if it passes the House, and it should, it's a bill that should have both conservative and if people are truly concerned about middle and lower income Alaska families, truly concerned about working Alaska families, it's a bill should have the support of those in the House coalition as well. But even if it passes the House, the prospects over in the Senate are not great. It would need 2/3 of the Senate as well. And that's a tall order. So some people have started proposing bills to deal with the PFD if HJR 7 doesn't pass. And there's a couple that got picked up in a Alaska News Source KTUU article that are sort of at the forefront. One is a bill by Mike Cronk before House Resources Committee, which would give residents the option to receive a one-time $15,000 dividend check and $5,000 in land credit in exchange for foregoing all future payouts. There's a lot of problems with that, but it's a version of the let's just distribute out the permanent fund and forget about it. It's much more limited version than that, but basically what Kronk's bill would do is give people a one-time payment, and they would forego all of their future claims. If somebody was 90 years old, it'd probably be a good deal for them
right
for their dependents. But that's one version. Jesse Sumner has a bill in that would set the PFD by statute. Set the PFD at let's see, what is it?
1,500,
I think.
Yeah,
$1,500, and then use the remainder to help pay out. You wouldn't cover the cost, but to help pay out the Alaska LNG project, building the big line down from the North Slope, and funding that. It would essentially convert PFDs over the limited amount, over the amount that would be set by statute, into going to into the big line. But it wouldn't nearly be enough to pay for the big line, and it wouldn't nearly. I mean, as we saw from the first segment, it wouldn't nearly be enough to pay for government. So basically, what it would say is, we're going to take all this money, we're going to devote it to the big line, and then we're going to set by statute a $1,500 PFD. But that doesn't prevent future legislatures, indeed the next legislature, from cutting that $1,500 because it's set by statute. Keep cutting it down. So we've got people who are coming up with other PFD proposals that are fun to look at in terms of I wonder how those numbers would work, but they don't really solve the problem. The bill that solves the problem, the bill that solves the government spending problem, and puts a line underneath all this spending, is Ben's HJR 7. And I think we ought to pay attention when HJR 7 finally does get a vote. We ought to pay attention to where those votes go, because the people who vote against it clearly are ones who are often the we need big government camp, and we don't care who we take the money from to well, we do care who we take the money from. We want to make sure we don't take it from the top 20%. We are in the camp of growing government through taxes on middle and lower income Alaska families.
It's interesting. Cliff Grow was quoted in one of the articles. I can't find it right now, but he was quoted basically when he was talking about HGR 7 is, oh well, we couldn't amend we couldn't amend the formula. I mean, that if we would have done it before. Well, no, up until this point, you haven't had to, because the POMV law takes precedent. You're treating it like it takes precedent over everything. So no, you could have. And then there's a quote in this KTUU article from Andy Josephson, who says, the question is, could we ever change the formula? And the problem with the current formula is that it would cost the state $2.3 billion and instantly create a $1.1 billion deficit. What HJR 7 would do is say, look, we're going to make some adjustments to this, but there's no indication that's ever going to happen. You're acting like you don't have the opportunity to change the statute. And by the way, HJR 7 wouldn't even go into effect till like 2026, 2027. So you got 2 years to figure out what you need to do. The thing is, they don't want to take a stand on the statutory formula. That's why they've always avoided it. The court said they could change it. They could basically said you can change the law anytime they've never changed it. They've simply broken it and ignored it because nobody wants to take a stand on the statutory formula itself, especially in an election year.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Josephson especially is the embodiment of what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago when Governor Walker's former chief of staff, Scott Kendall, talked about, said the quiet part out loud, said we can't pass HJR 7 because the government wouldn't have enough money. And basically what that is, we can't raise it from the top 20%. We can't raise it from anybody else. We need to confiscate it from middle and lower income Alaska families. We need to confiscate their money to fund government because we don't think we can raise the same amount if we have to do it on a broad-based basis, or if we have to go, raise oil taxes, or if we have to do something else. We don't think we have enough votes to do that. So we need to stay where we are, where we can raid the PFD whenever we need to, for whatever amount we need to, and continue to fund big government programs. That tells you exactly what's going on. It tells you exactly what HJR 7 does. HJR 7 puts a bottom line under government spending. And if we don't do that, we're going to go back. We're going to be having the first segment of today's show over and over and over and over again about, well, look what they did this time. And now it's not POMB 2575. Now it's POMB 2080. And now it's 1585. Right. And now it's 1090 as it just gradually fades away.
It's 100% for government. It's 100%. That's what it should be, right? That's what everybody says right now. Less than 2 minutes here, Brad. Let's summate everything. 1, 2, and 3. I mean, they're all conjoined, but it's just, there's a sickness. There's a disease. The politician's disease has now run rampant. It's reached epidemic stage. I would say pandemic stage in the legislature right now. They just can't help themselves. And they're going to spend every available dollar and glom onto any ones they can. Your final thoughts?
Well, and Michael, the sad thing about this is it's both sides of the aisle, and it includes the governor. I mean, everybody has come up with a scheme for how they can spend the PFD, spend the remaining dollars. Judy Colom's child care subsidization bill, the education bill, Governor Dunleavy's $75 million or $76 million, whatever the heck it is, for teacher bonuses. Governor Dunleavy's Alaska Affordability Act, $250 million for the Alaska Affordability Act to create a tax credit to outsource government functions to the corporations. It's just, they can't stop themselves. HJR 7 would.
Right.
And that's why,
that's why he can't find any support in the Senate right now. Rob Myers was on yesterday. He said 7, maybe 8 votes, and that's about all they've got right now, counting heads in the Senate. So good luck with that. Unfortunately, it's frightening. All right, Brad, thank you so much for coming on board. As always, it's good to talk with you.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Okay, folks, we got hour 2 dead ahead. Chris Story, my commentary, which is going to be spicy. Yeah, Brad, I just, this makes me come to the conclusion, that, well, I've come to this before and I've said it before. I really think that we're going to have to hit the rock bottom before anybody wakes up. I really do. I mean, I think at this point, watching all this, I mean, at a national level too, but I mean, really here in the state of Alaska, the whole thing's going to have to explode before anybody ever actually goes, well, wait, maybe we could have done it and they'll go back and say that Brad Keithley guy, he was right. That Michael Dukes guy, he was right. Well, great. I'll be right. But you could have stopped it. You could have pulled the brake lever instead of shoveling the coal in. And that's all they're doing right now.
Yeah. The problem is the PFD will be gone. I mean, to hit rock bottom, the PFD will be gone. And it's going to be, at that point, we will have created so many spending constituencies out there, so many people invested in spending for the programs that we will have created, that we won't be able to get it back.
Well, it'll be devastating. It'll be devastating to people. We will have created such a dependency state that people will be hurt across the spectrum, and it was avoidable. That's the thing. It was avoidable, but nobody wanted to exercise any kind of self-control. And this is all pointing right to that fiscal cliff that we're about to plunge off of with the locomotive at high speed. And, the thing is, it's preventable. That's the worst part. It's preventable, but nobody wants to take the hard stand. Well, I mean, let me say, Ben Carpenter and some of those other are taking the hard stand, but nobody else in the group wants to go, well, he's right. Or maybe behind their hands, they say he's right, but I just can't let my kids. I've got not my project. My project's important. My district asked for childcare. My district asked for the Division of Ag to be there and everything. No, we couldn't pay the price for all this. Somebody else should pay the price.
Yeah, exactly, Michael. And we're creating programs. I mean, people sort of view this as the way legislative finance does this is the coming year. But what you don't really let sink in, and what looking at a 10-year plan or even a 20-year plan begins to tell you, is we can't afford where this is going. Even if you take away the entire PFD, and even if you start in on taxes, we can't afford where this is going. We can't afford the programs that we've created as they continue to grow, as they continue to expand. This nirvana that everybody thinks they're getting to out there, where Alaska's funded all these programs and everybody's coming back. They ain't going to be coming back, folks, because we can't afford the continuation of those programs. We are draining ourselves, not only currently, we're draining ourselves into the future. Some people talk about, well, if we can just get to $100 billion in the permanent fund, that'll throw off enough cash to finance us. It won't. If you look at the projections, even if you assume some oil production growth and you assume some oil production price growth, both of which are pretty risky projections at this point. Even if you assume that, and even if you assume $100 billion in the permanent fund, and even if you assume that's throwing off 5% a year, it can't pay for the government we're creating. And we're having this debate now. We're going to be having this debate 10 years from now, 20 years from now, except people are going to be saying, I can't tax myself to the level to pay for the government we've created.
Well, there was that article in Must Read, and I've forgotten who the guy's name was, but he was going through it, and he's like, just if you looked at just the spend on schools, it's 6.7% of the overall income of the state is being spent on schools. So just to pay for schools, if you had to tax, you'd have to put a 6.7% tax on all the available income in the state just to pay for schools. I mean, just think about that for a minute. 6.7% of all income, you'd have to pay that tax right off the get.
What sort of happened? I mean, this goes back to the early 2010s when we saw this with the AstroTurf football fields for all of the high schools in the state. What sort of happened somewhere along the way is the sense that we want to live in Alaska, but we want to have all of the great things that the lower 48 has.
Right.
So we're gonna
in Alaska, but I want to live like I'm in Seattle.
Yeah, exactly. And I want all the social programs that I had when I was in the lower 48, and I want all of the fancy stuff that I had when I was in the lower 48, and I want the great universities that I had when I was in the lower, all three of them that I had when I was in the lower 48. And that's not Alaska. We can't finance all that stuff.
Right.
We are a smaller state, and we need to have limited expectations. We come here for the lifestyle.
Right.
If you want all the social programs, go to Illinois or go to California.
Well, it's a Californication of Alaska, which has happened in many other states where they moved out of California because of all the taxes and everything else, and then they go someplace else and they're like, we really like it to be like it was back there. You don't understand correlation, causation. You know, the causality is you wanted all those things, and that's why you left, because of all those things, it was making it untenable to live there, and nobody acknowledges that. Nobody acknowledges that as well.
You wanted all those things, but you didn't like the taxes you had to pay for them. So you came to a state where you thought you could get all those things, where you keep voting those things in because you think you don't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
But that's
the thing. Always somebody else is going to pay for it. There's a politician's disease, and then there's the general public at large's disease, which is somebody else will always pay for it. That's the thing. We want all those things as long as the public. It's the myth of the commons. It's the whole thing all over again. Tragedy of the commons all over it. All right, Brad. Well, we're out of time. Thank you for coming on board as always.
Michael, thank you for having me.
Oh man, I know. Jeannie said, "When does the flogging stop?" No offense to Brad, but I mean, when does the flogging stop? I don't know. Maybe when the wheels come off the bus. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it. Folks, we're out of time. We got to go. Hour 2 is right now. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Also, of course, broadcasting live is a simulcast on YouTube and Twitch and usually Facebook, although it's being reported now that Facebook and Instagram are both down across the globe. This has caused a bit of a panic. It's up on Drudge right now. We were in the middle of the broadcast when everybody crashed out of Facebook. I thought it was just me. But apparently they've got something like over 1 million users who have just been logged out of their accounts and can't get back in. And so if you thought you were getting hacked, don't worry. You weren't getting hacked. I was a little concerned for a moment, but it is a crazy world. But you can come out and join us on YouTube, or you can join us on Twitch. Maybe I should add Rumble to that mix. I don't know. I'm already broadcasting on 3 different platforms at the same time, in addition to regular old plain terrestrial radio. So it's however you want to do it. Just go to my website, michaeldukeshow.com, and you can find all the links to everything, whatever you want to watch. And the live stream is up. So if you just want to listen to the live stream, which has stayed up today, last couple of days it's been up and down. I don't know what the deal is, but you're good. We're good. So it's all good. Anyway, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for coming on board and joining us. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and to say I'm a little heated about some of this stuff would probably be an understatement. I said that the whole thing is the whole thing is spicy. I'm so irritated by people's tone, and I want to go back and talk about this article that Brad quoted in his number 2, which was talking specifically about means testing. But I want to go back to this article because I think it encapsulates perfectly the attitude of many Alaskans. Now, I have to take a bit of this with a grain of salt because this gentleman who wrote this opinion piece, his name is Al Balea. I don't know him from Adam. He's a retired leadership trainer and a former distinguished visiting professor at UAA. He's also a retired oil and gas executive, so I guess that's how Brad knows him, because they run in the same circles. But, I mean, I guess, first of all, you'd have to say, well, sure, he's from UAA. Of course, he's going to be a fan of government spending and everything else. But what got me about this whole thing is the tone. The tone of the whole thing, which is essentially, if you don't see this, you're stupid. That, of course, we have to take that money and spend it. Of course, it's just a welfare check, and we should just treat it that way. And all this spend should be going on. I mean, we're already spending more on state government. We're spending more on education than almost any other state in the nation. Yet we continue to scrape the bottom of the barrel when it comes to academic achievement scores and everything else. Here's what he writes, and I'm going to make commentary throughout this, but I'm going to read this article from Al Balea. It's an opinion piece. It says it's time to have a hard conversation about the future of the PFD. This is him having a hard conversation about it. He said, in all my years of teaching and coaching leadership to university students and corporate clients, 2 observations of poor leadership have stayed with me. The first is what I call pretending not to know. A current example is pretending not to know that the state can no longer afford to pay the permanent fund dividend. To which I would comment right off the bat, to say, no, the state cannot afford to spend at its current levels. I guess if you look at the PFD as it's just more government welfare, and it doesn't mean what Hammond said, what Hickel said, what any of the founders and framers that created the permanent fund or the permanent fund dividend said, I guess I could see how you might have this mindset. But again, it's just the arrogance and the elitism that we see in this. Legislators and administrators in Juneau are going through the annual budget deficit machinations, trying to fund education and critical services, but pretending not to know that the solution is to reduce or eliminate the PFD. So, again, just take it from everybody. Just take it from everybody. I mean, this was your share of the oil wealth. This was Hammond's warning, by the way, after that first $900 almost $1 billion payment to the state, which when at the time, again, just to put things in perspective, at the time, the state budget was roughly $160 million a year. Just let that sink in for a minute. $160 million a year for the whole state. And they got $1 billion payment, 968 or whatever. They got $1 billion payment, and they burned through it like a house on fire. They went through it. They gave drunken sailors a bad name. They went through it so fast. And that's when Hammond said, whoa, we might have a problem. If we keep dropping this kind of money on these legislators and future legislators, we're going to have a problem because they're going to grow government to the size that is unsustainable. So we need to share a portion of this wealth with the Alaskan people, giving them skin in the game so that they can understand and hold back the tide of this unsustainable governmental growth. And where are we today? We're not listening. People like Al Bolay and others are like, well, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. Spend. Doesn't matter. Now we'll continue. All sorts of arm waving occur whenever one mentions reducing or eliminating the PFD. It's in the state constitution is a big one. Okay, amend the constitution. Sure, it would be tough, but stop wasting time and get on with it. You idiots. That's it. Stop wasting and just get on it. He said that leads to my second observation on poor leadership, the belief that we need a crisis to make tough decisions. Politicians refer to this as cover. Are you kidding me? We've been living in a crisis since 2016. That's why the permanent fund is getting battered around all the time. It's a perpetual crisis at this point. We don't need any more crises. He said the crisis is just a way to escape personal accountability. When things are in crisis, people want to survive, so just about anything can be passed through under the guise of survivals. Leaders don't wait for a crisis. They don't shy away from tough decisions. Take that money and spend it on government like you should, you idiots. Here's another thought. Are we already in a crisis and pretending not to know? Yes. Step back for a moment and think about these issues. A systemic decline in the state's working-age population, years of structural budget deficits, underfunded schools. Oh, my Lord, save me. Underfunded schools, a decline in oil revenues, and a narrowing economy with little hope of anything but stagnation and decline. All right, let's take that apart for just a second. Let's just take that apart for just a second. Systemic decline in the state's working age population. It is a fact that is going on. It may not be as bad as they think, but it is happening right now. No doubt about it. But you got to ask yourself, why are these people leaving? Why are these people leaving the state? Could it be because the cost of living is so high and the size and scope of government is too much? That's never a question that they ask. Years of structural budget deficits. Again, could that not point to the fact that we're spending more than we should? Structural deficit, years of structural deficit. We spent $15 billion out of the CBR in the teens. And nobody batted it. It was like just business as usual. Oh, we'll just tap another billion or two out of the CBR. Don't worry about it. We'll just spend more than we take in, and that will be sustainable. If you were looking for leadership, Al, maybe you should look to people who said, this can't continue. This is unsustainable. Underfunded schools. Well, we've already discussed how that's ridiculous to begin with. A decline in oil revenues. Yes, it is declining. A narrowing economy with little hope of anything but stagnation and decline. Well, you don't even care about the private economy to begin with. You could just give two poops less about just pump that button, that give a crap button over and over again. It doesn't matter. You don't care about the private economy. He's talking about the public economy, stagnation and decline. Well, you have to understand that it has to be responsive because we have a divorcing of the public and private economy because there's no connectivity between the two. That's all they care about is the public economy. And if it stagnates or declines at all, oh, that's bad. No, that's being responsive. That's what happens when you have a downturn in an economy and everything has to adjust. That's what you do. That's what every other state does. That's what every other corporation or household budget does. When there is a lack of revenue, you have to adjust. Stagnation and decline are not mutually exclusive. You can have a decline without stagnation. Sometimes you've got to consolidate. Permanent fund trustees warning that we're running out of spendable reserves to support the state budget. Well, there's a manufactured crisis. We just put $8 billion from the earnings reserve into the corpus of the permanent fund over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, and now it's a crisis. Well, now there's not enough to spend. That's because you put it in the corpus on purpose, knowing that it was going to cause this kind of problem. Massive increases in Medicaid spending. Well, yeah, dependency state, and that's what you want to spend more of, is just create more of a dependency state. Disturbing growth in the homeless population. The threat of future power blackouts because of nearly depleted gas reserves in the Cook Inlet, with a massive gas reserve on the North Slope, remains out of reach. And residents of areas like the Mat-Su region being told by officials to arm up because police protection is not available for the first line of defense. That feels like a crisis to me. Well, yes, it's a spending crisis. It's a prioritization crisis. Shouldn't you be prioritizing public safety and public health over some of these other things? Do we have to we have one, again, the whole thing, where do you say? Medicaid, massive spendings and increases in Medicaid spending. That's because 1/3, 270,000+ Alaskans are on some form of Medicaid or public assistance. You can thank Governor Walker for that, of course, expanding to every option and doing all that other stuff. But of course, that's a problem. Some legislators are proposing an income tax to cover the budget deficit. They're pretending not to know that the only reason we would increase taxes is to be able to pay the dividend. The dividend should have first call. It always should have had first call. That was the intent. It was a transfer for years before Walker changed the way that they accounted for it. It was outside of the budget. It should never have been brought inside the budget. But taxes would spread that equitability across all income levels. I'm not a fan of taxes, don't get me wrong, but I do understand the mechanics and the metrics of at least everyone would pay, everyone would share their shoulder of the burden. Everyone would feel the pain based on, that equitability of a flat tax or some kind of income. I mean, I don't want it, but it's going to be here, folks. I guarantee you right now, within the next 3 years, we'll hear the machinations. Oh, free rides die hard. You Alaskans, you've been getting a free ride this whole time. You should pay your fair share. I can see it already. He goes on to say, let's face it, the PFD is the most discretionary line item in the budget. No, it's not. I mean, they treat it like it is, but it shouldn't be. That was not the intent. That was not what the framers wanted. Again, it was supposed to have first call on that money. It's right there you can go back and read the intent statement when they formed it. It's supposed to have first call. It's not supposed to be a discretionary line. There's a special place in hell for Bill Walker for thinking that up. I like Bill. Bill's a friend of mine. I supported his run for governor the first time around. I thought he had some great ideas. This was disastrous. It goes on to talk about means testing and the needs, that we need to have a means test. Let's only pay the PFD to low-income people who need it. Households below a certain income level would get the entire PFD, while higher-income households would get none. Going through it again, just pretending it's like it's a welfare check. Confirming their own biases that this is a welfare check. Not understanding the history of it, not understanding why it was put in place in the first place, not just to give people money, but as a stopgap, as a check on the size and growth of government. But I guess what can we expect from somebody who worked for the University of Alaska? And again, don't know Al Balea from Adam. Couldn't disagree with him more. And again, the whole tone of this article just pisses me off because I'm apparently too stupid to understand his reasoning. The word idiot is in between the lines of almost every paragraph of this article. Somebody just said, post a link to this article. Why? Would you like to see your blood pressure go up? All right, I'll post a link to the article in the chat room and you guys can see it. Don't forget, you got to have that $200 a year ADN subscription to read all this stuff, right? Sorry, that was my little jab from yesterday. All right, we got to go. We're going to continue here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. What does this mean for us? And Brad and I were talking about this at the top of the hour during the break. I got to tell you, well, I'll tell you here in a minute. And we'll need Chris after I get done with the next segment. That's what we're going to need, Chris, in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Your mental suppository. The Michael Duke Show.
Oh, man. I mean, it's just, let me go back over here. Facebook is hosed for me this morning. Yeah, Facebook is down globally. Facebook and Instagram are down right now. They had multiple millions outages. The issue is global. Threads, Instagram, and Facebook Messenger are all down. WhatsApp, it also had a small outage as well, which is owned by Meta. But apparently 40% of the reports on Down Detector show that it's login issues. It basically logged everybody out. The video is still up running on Facebook right now. I could see it I could see it I have a Facebook window open where I'm not logged in, but I'm on the video page and I could still see it rolling. But it is down right now. And in fact, what do we got? It'll tell me. I have no people watching on Facebook right now. For a while there, even after everybody got kicked out, there were 6 or 7 people watching. So it's going on right now. Good morning. When the state goes kaput, I'll be on the beach in the Sun Belt drinking a margarita, says Chris. Isn't that sad? That's sad. I mean, I would love to be, I would love to just die and retire here, right? Retire and not in that order. I'd like to retire and then, but more and more, it looks like this is the answer for many people. They just can't, can't even afford it anymore to live here. It's just crazy. Good morning. Looking at California people who live in a place with perpetual deficits that they think they can find a job come out ahead. Yeah, well. North Pole. We cannot sustain. Gary says we cannot sustain the Medicaid expansion. That was just a cash handout. I mean, it was a blatant buying of votes, is what it was. And yes, a tremendous expansion in our costs. Herder says this is freaking infuriating. This guy, again, talking about the tone of the article. Yeah, I know. I'm reading through this going, I never wanted to punch somebody in the face so hard. How long have these people that are tampering with the dividend even lived in this state? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think Scooter Kendall had a big hand in what was going on with Bill Walker. I think he was the power behind the throne for a while on that. Brian said, what is also strange is that last night Instagram started decidedly pushing progressive content. Could not escape. I guess that's why. I mean, I have an Instagram account, but I hardly ever am on it. Yeah. Tawny says, that's precious. Al Balea saying we should means test this and give it to the lower income people because considering the stolen dollars from the PFD has a larger negative effect on the lower income people, just pay the full statutory PFD. And Randy says, oh, Bill Walker's a hero. I'm sorry, Randy. You couldn't be more wrong if you tried. You couldn't be more wrong if you tried. I mean, not even. You are, yeah. You're just wrong, Randy. I love you to death, man, but you're so wrong. I've heard it rumored that if we actually got a fair share dividend, it would be $20,000 to $30,000 per year minus all the taxes. Well, no, that's if they paid us all directly and then charged us for taxes. If we got the full statutory dividend, it would. Oh, maybe if you mean not just the 25%, but no, it's shows how we are all Facebook junkies, says Cindy. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. All right, we got to get back to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that kind of stuff on wherever you can. If you're on YouTube right now, this is the time to ring that bell and hit subscribe so you can get notifications when we go live.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
So what does this mean for us? What does all this noise mean? Right? I mean, because it's not just Al Balea, right? It's not just him in his little opinion piece here that just infuriates me. It's all the other things. Let's go back over to the discussion on the PFD, the HJR7, right? The constitutional amendment. So first and foremost, I found it ironic that Cliff Grow, who was here to grow your PFD. Remember that was part of his campaign thing, to grow your PFD. He was just stymied as to how this would help because, then we'd have to change the formula. And boy, we just couldn't do that because we couldn't do that. Well, yes, you can. You're the legislature. If it's a crisis, if it's a problem, then you fix it. The problem is nobody wants to stand behind it. Nobody wants to be the guy or gal that voted to change the statutory. We can ignore it with impunity and say, well, we'd love to do that. But the second that they open it up and they take it apart and they make it so that you don't get that statutory amount, or it becomes a 50-50, or they put the 75-25 into the statutory formula, whatever it is that they do, then they have to stand behind it. Then they have to stand by that vote, and they don't want to do that. So then we got these other options. Mike Cronk's HB 359, which would give residents the payout of $15,000 and $5,000 in land credit in exchange for taking no dividend ever again in the long run, which quite honestly, if that put up, I might take that. And I probably would encourage all my kids and friends to take that, my family to take that, because I don't think the dividend's going to be here in the next 3 years. Well, I think I would take that. I think I would take that $15,000 cash payout and a $5,000 land credit. I mean, I'd rather see it be a full $20,000 in cash. I mean, I'd rather see it be, wasn't Mackey's proposal $50,000? I think it was a $50,000 payout when Rep Mackey talked about it. Hell, that was 20 years ago. How did we lose so much value? Then you got Jesse Sumner, who wants to cap the dividend at $1,500 and then make the permanent fund invest in the gas pipeline, have 25% ownership because they've done such a great job with all this other stuff. But then we get to the amendments that were being proposed to all these different. Well, first, I guess we'll get to Andy Josephson's comment again, which, he's like one of my least favorite people in the legislature. Josephson said the problem with constitutionalizing the dividend and making it guaranteed is the amount will be pegged by a formula that's been in place since 1982. Acting like that's a permanent thing. Acting like somehow that matters. I mean, you guys have ignored that statute for the last 8 years. And you're acting like, well, that really, that's the problem. Oh, this would be great, except for it will peg it to the formula. And that, the question is, could we ever change that formula? This is Josephson. And the problem with the current formula is that it would cost $2.3 billion and instantly create a $1.1 billion deficit. Well, first of all, that it wouldn't even go into effect until 26 or 27, right? So how would that create a problem right this minute? He said what the resolution would do is it says, look, we're going to make some adjustments to this, the statutory formula, but there is no indication that's ever going to happen. You're acting like your hands are tied and this is out of your hands. You guys are there dealing with it. What? I mean, you act like you are helpless babes in the woods on this. We just couldn't do that. Again, Josephson does not want to be pegged as a guy who cut back on the dividend. Doing it as a body, that's great. But voting on it, don't want to take a stand on that. Then Zach Fields introduced an amendment that would make individuals ineligible whose adjusted gross income is more than $50,000 or joint filers making more than $100,000. So if any of you out there are single making 50 grand or more or 100 grand or more as a couple, nope, no dividend for you. Andrew Gray introduced a similar amendment that put the threshold up to 150. Well, that was very nice of you, Andy. Thank you. And then he likened it to child trafficking. He tied child trafficking into this at some point, saying child trafficking is caused by child poverty, which I don't know. But again, just kind of a weird segue on that. Jamie Allard called Gray's amendment discriminatory. Fields' amendment would also have been discriminatory. And then Fields also introduced an amendment that would make unemployed residents 18 to 65 years of age ineligible for the PFD because they're unemployed, which I would tell you my wife would scratch your eyes out. Okay? She's been unemployed for the 33 years we've been married. And I would say doesn't work. I always put it as she doesn't work outside the home because she works her ass off inside the home. Raising 5 kids, homeschooling, taking care of the household, helping me with my business, doing all this other stuff. Oh, she's unemployed, but she works a lot to help with that. But oh no, we couldn't do that. 18, ineligible. He said we would, I think, unintentionally be creating a situation where we would be incentivizing unemployed people with large families from the lower 48 to move here. Oh, for the love of God Almighty. If you had a family of 4 moving from the States and you got a statutory PFD, which is what, $3,200 according to statute this year, something like that, $3,300. So your family of 4 is going to make $12,000 a year. Who's going to support a family of 4 and $12,000 a year? I'm just asking. Raise your hand. Who could live as a single person on $12,000 a year? Raise your hand. It's the dumbest thing I ever heard. The dumbest thing I ever heard. Frank Tomaszewski, basically, he got upset about that. He goes, like, if my wife stayed at home when we were young and starting a family, you would deny her a permanent fund dividend because she's at home? You're hurting families who choose to stay at home with their children? I mean, talking about childcare being so expensive and all this other stuff. Here's where it's going to end up. And I was talking with Brad about that. I just don't think with Al Balea, with all these other commentaries, with these pinheads who are in the legislature right now saying stuff. Look, I just don't think it's going to stop, people. I do not think it's going to stop until the wheels come off the bus. I mean, back to my train analogy, right? We could see the fiscal cliff. We could see it coming. We could see the bridges out. We're crying and shaking and hooting and blowing the horns and saying, stop, stop, stop. And they are just throwing the coal in as fast as they can shovel it. Hold my beer. Watch what happens next. I think we're just going to sail right off the end of the fiscal cliff. I mean, over the next 5 to 8 years, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see the dividend gone. You're going to see an implementation of a sales tax or an income tax or a flat or some kind of tax on top of the taking of the PFD, which was already a tax. And they're just going to consume more and more and more, and they'll drive more people out. And Alaska will literally become a park because the only people who can afford to live here are the people who work for government and the service industries that support government. And then, I mean, it'll eventually just reach a point where they just cannot generate enough money. And then the problem is then real people are going to be hurt because you've created such a dependency state. You've created such a dependency by so many different groups and so many different special interests that are receiving monies that when the money dries up and comes to a screeching halt because we just don't have the money, all of those groups are going to be hurt. And the worst part is it was all totally avoidable. We knew the bridge was coming up. We knew the bridge was right there ahead, and we could have put our hand on the brake and pulled back slowly and coasted to a stop. But we didn't. And because of that, whole swaths of Alaskans are going to be decimated in the future because of it. I'm just convinced that's where we're going to have to go, both in Alaska and in the U.S., in the country, because we just can't stop ourselves. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Chris Story up next.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. I know you want your second PFD thing, Randy, but it's been ruled unconstitutional already, so I don't know why you thought, I mean, anyway, it doesn't even matter. Do the 18,000 illegals that have been flown into Alaska qualify for a dividend after being here for 1 year? They could qualify even more. Did you see this opinion? You see this Alaska Supreme Court decision on the Jenny Armstrong case? Well, that's going to cause some problems. It was a split decision in the Supreme Court, which is unusual. Usually they're unanimous. It was a split decision. They're basically saying if you come to Alaska and leave a few things behind and then say you're going to come back, then you're a resident. If you rented a room or stayed with a friend and left a suitcase with some clothes in it and said, I'm coming back one day to live in Alaska, you are officially an Alaska resident. I don't know if you saw that. That was a whole thing I was going to talk about today, but this Al Belay thing just pissed me off. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's a thing. If it pleases the crown, Sumner's a train wreck. Sumner is a disappointment. I really, Bill says, my girlfriend is currently spending $1,700 a month for rent in a 1-bedroom apartment. I mean, how would you make it on $12,000 a year? By yourself, how would you make it on $12,000 a year, let alone with a family of 4? Welcome to Homer. Okay. That is today's stupid comment, but today's still young. What was today's stupid comment? I want to know. We should pull the plug on everything and go back to the old days. Oh, you would not want that, my friend. You would not want that. Most unpopular governor in U.S. history. Boy, I would make a mess, though, wouldn't I? Ooh, I would go in there and just make a mess. Anyway, yeah, that will. What will that make voting a train wreck? Yeah, the most avoidable crisis ever, says Brian. That is today's stupid comment. Well, yeah, I mean, it feels bad, man. Hashtag feels bad. It just feels so bad because I know that it's not. I know that it's avoidable. That's the worst part. So many people are going to be just absolutely decimated by this. But I just know we could have dodged that bullet, but we didn't. Save me.
Morning, Michael.
Save me from myself.
What?
Save me from myself.
Jump.
Just jump and get it over with. I mean, I'll be honest. I fully believe that we're just not going to. I just fully believe that the lemming syndrome, we're just not going to see it in time. We're just going to basically just gracefully fly. It'll be like Butch Cassidy, and it'll be like Thelma and Louise, only with a freight train, and we'll just ride over the edge, and it just get whee,
Not to go too far off topic, but did you watch True Detective with Jodie Foster set in Alaska?
Did not.
Season 4. It's interesting. I won't give any spoiler alert. But there's an opening scene, which is not a spoiler alert, where a bunch of reindeer just run off of a cliff. And anyway, I just wondered what your thoughts about that were. But if you haven't seen it, I'll let you go watch it later.
That seems a little really. I mean, I didn't realize
Caribou. Actually,
I didn't realize that was a reindeer thing. That was not the reindeer game that
they couldn't fly.
Yeah,
no, they couldn't fly.
They could not fly.
Apparently,
so that seems a little problematic. Let me just put it.
It's a harsh, hard to watch show. Jodie Foster said it's one of the things she's most proud of in her career, and I'm still trying to figure out why. But I haven't seen her entire catalog. So maybe it is, but I was sorely disappointed. But I'll leave it to you to watch, and it's only 6 episodes, so you should be able to consume that in a weekend.
No, I watched the first couple seasons of True Detective, and I thought the first one especially was amazing. The first one was really it was dark. It was really good. But after that, I didn't watch the third one, and I have not watched the fourth one. And from what I'm hearing, I don't think I'll probably bother watching. It'll be 6 hours of my life I'll never get back. But so I mean, I don't know. But your thoughts overall? Not impressed or what?
Just disappointed, not impressed, disappointed. It had so much potential, just squandered.
Yeah. What's our game plan for today, Chris?
The greatness of grits.
The greatness of grit. All right, we're gonna get into it.
Grits.
Oh, grits. The greatness of grits. I actually like grits, with a little cheese and salt. Okay, here we go. We're gonna jump back into it then. Chris Story, our guest, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe. Apparently, Facebook is back up. There you go. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The final segment of the show. Boy, did we need it today. Oh, Dolly. Oh, Dolly. Chris Story, our guest, the man from Homer. He comes in to help us with our weekly uplift, our life coaching lesson. Today, it's the food segment. We're going to talk about the greatness of grits, which I love grits. I didn't understand what they were until one day I actually had them and I thought, well, these are tasty. I like these. These are, but I mean, did I ever tell you my Randy Travis story about grits, Chris?
No, got to hear that.
I was in Fairbanks and I worked, this is when I was much, much younger. I worked for a limousine company part-time and I would drive limousines, and Randy Travis had a concert in Fairbanks. And so I picked him up at the airport, took him to the hotel, and his wife, who, well, it's well known in industry circles, she's not a very nice person. Anyway, she asked me to go get grits for him. He wanted some grits. Well, okay. I quite honestly didn't know what grits were. I mean, I knew that they were some kind of food, so I went to every grocery store in Fairbanks and couldn't find grits. I actually came back. I came back with 2 or 3 things that I paid for out of my own pocket, including a cream of wheat or malt-o-meal or something, which I knew was close, but not quite. But they just didn't carry grits in Fairbanks. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s. They just didn't carry grits in Fairbanks, right? And so when I got there, oh, the look on her face, I never even saw him, but she was just so disgusted with me that I couldn't possibly find grits in Fairbanks, Alaska. Anyway, sorry, that's anytime I think of grits, I think of that. But go ahead. The greatness of grits, hit me with it.
Man, that's funny. It's disappointing because I like to think that he's a really nice guy. But
I think he is.
Maybe,
yeah, she was his manager
yeah.
and his wife, and she was not a nice person. It was kind of like I said, I was warned before I picked them up that she was the one to avoid, kind of thing. Anyway, go ahead.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I figured let's serve up grits 2 ways. And first of all, grits are disgusting. Grits are simply a vehicle for flavor. So they don't taste like anything other than bland desperation unless you add butter, salt, or cheese and salt, as you just mentioned. So grits are simply a vehicle by themselves. They're nasty. You could survive on them, but nobody eats grits alone.
Yeah, you're not eating plain grits. I will say that. You are not. Nope. It's like I'm not eating. I love cream of wheat, but I'm not eating plain cream of wheat either. There's got to be some butter in there, a little cream, maybe a pinch of brown sugar or some jelly or something.
It's almost like, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's some weirdos that will sit down and just eat vanilla ice cream. No, it's a vehicle for other things. What are you doing? All right. So the greatness of grit served 2 ways. Grit, as you know, let's just call it a small annoyance to the oyster, makes for a gorgeous outcome, something we call the pearl. So that's one kind of grit. The effort in working out or the effort in going for a long walk or a jog, grit is eating healthy. Grit is something that makes life worth living. It makes the pearls of life that you and I become most proud of. Some of those difficult times that we've gone through, that is a form of grit that comes out on the other side as, wow, what a victory. I'm so grateful. As the great Robert Schuller said, tough times never last, but tough people do. And that's grit. That is one kind of grit. And then there's another kind of grit by definition, and that is a lifestyle of courage. Sticking to a difficult path, keeping on when things are tough, being that sort of tough person, if you will. So grit is courage. It's daring against the odds, standing for what's right, even when it's difficult. Maybe you're standing alone, that lone voice in the wilderness, but you do it anyway. That's another kind of grit. George Washington, when he was a teenager, was at his family farm, and he heard a scream in the woods and a woman screaming. He dropped what he was doing and he raced into the woods, got to the edge. On the far side there was a river, and 2 men were holding a woman, and she was screaming hysterically. And so George Washington shows up and says, "What's going on here?" And these guys say, "She's trying to jump into the river and she's going to die." And so he listens to her. What she's saying is, "My baby is in the river. My son is going to drown. He's drowning. I got to go save him." George Washington looks out as a teenager, looks out and he sees a child. There's just the back of a child floating down this river, and this is a fast moving river with rocks, jagged rocks, rapids, whirlpools. He doesn't think twice. He jumps in and he swims as fast as he can, trying to avoid the jagged rocks and the trees and the outcroppings. And he finally reaches the child, grabs him just in time, lifts him up before he hits his head on a rock. They both go over a very steep waterfall, very long. It was far down to the pool below, and he saves the child's life. It's just one of many stories about George Washington and grit. And it just is throughout history. We know that people that will take and make something out of a difficult time have something to show for it, or those who will simply endure during difficult times. Either form of grit will make for the perfect breakfast of champions. To torture the metaphor even further.
You're really squeezing all you can out of that one, right? You got to have stick-to-itiveness, right? And especially in light when you're going, especially for a long-term goal, and you're thinking about things, and you're going up and down, you're going, you're facing the pitfalls, you're facing the tough times. It's always that one more inch, right? But you got to have some stick-to-itiveness, as the old cowboys would say.
Well, I'm really grateful for difficult times that I've gone through in my life. As I look back, you're never grateful in the moment. It's difficult to see, keep your head above water in the moment, whether it's a financial difficulty or relationship difficulty. In the moment, it's very difficult to see the pearl that's just beyond. And there's nothing more annoying than somebody going, "Oh, you're going to be so grateful when you're on the far side of this. I know you feel like you're being waterboarded and you're about to drown, but trust me, it's going to be worth it." That's annoying, but it's good to remember. It is good to remember that tough times never last, but tough people do. This piece of grit in your life right now could be on the far side of difficulty, something amazing. And then also just knowing that throughout history, throughout time, it's the people with grit that are the most brave or courageous, even when they didn't have any reason to be. The little person that could, the small individual stood up and said, there are but two genders. There is a way forward. This is confiscation without representation. You are taxing the people, but you're telling us you're not. Whatever it is, if you are willing to stand up and take the heat and say, hey, there's a problem over here, that is grit. That is courage. And on the far side of that will be a better life for you and those that you're aiming to serve and help.
I like it. So how do we develop the grit, Chris? I mean, again, we always like to go break it back to basics. Okay, great. It's good to have grit. But what if you feel like what if you feel like you're in Fairbanks in the early 2000s and you can't find any grits at all?
Well, you faced your problem. You brought her an alternative. It wasn't your problem that she turned out to be a useless, mean person. You did what you could. You stuck to it, and a lot of people wouldn't even show back up. Why did you even show back up?
Right. Well,
what are you doing?
I was
hoping you have no obligation to show back up.
I was hoping for a good tip. I mean, what do you want?
You were hoping he would write a song about you. And that's really the reality of it.
I wanted to see a song about grits in Fairbanks, grits in the snow or something. I mean, I wanted to see something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think if you take the idea of grits, the food, and you go, it's pretty bland, it's pretty boring without adding something to it, some spice. Something's got to go into those grits to make them palatable. That's life. You got to add your own grit to life. You have to be willing to go through the trials and tribulations and just recognize that. And read history. I think that's you say, what's it? Break it down. Read history. You want to be inspired. Read Seward's biography. Read Lincoln's biography. Read Kennedy. Read about Napoleon. These people. Now, Napoleon was, a despot, obviously, but read. Just learning about what other people have gone through against all odds can inform how you'll handle those odds when you run into them. And odds are you're going to find that's a hurdle in your way simply to jump over. It's not a blockade. And I think I love Jim Rohn's version of the ants. He says, think about an ant. Live your life like an ant. You'll go through it, around it, over it. You'll chew through it. Nothing will stop an ant who, by the way, can carry 10 times its body weight. That's what we're aiming for. And just recognizing, I think that bit of grit in your shell right now is going to create an oyster. Annoying as it sounds when you're in it, just go back to it. Create your own analogy, whatever works for you, to recognize this is temporary. This isn't permanent. This is just a temporary situation. And on the far side of difficult is something wonderful.
I always liked the there was the analogy, and I can't remember who said it, but somebody, I remember watching I don't know, anyway, wherever it came from. The guy says, if you're going to fall down, if you're working towards a goal, you're hurt, if you're going to fall, at least fall forward because you're 6 feet closer to your goal, and then get up and do it again. And that's kind of that kind of, to me, epitomizes the idea of perseverance, grit, sticking it out, doing whatever. If you're going to fall, you may fall down, but fall forward. So at least you're 6 feet closer, right? I mean, that's part of that grit.
Like, Michael, right now, you don't even know what I'm going through as we broadcast currently. My puppy, Tallulah, has just been released from her kennel. She's jumped up into my chair. She's in my face, and I'm having to compose myself as though that's not happening. Well, yes, it's 17 years of professional broadcast experience that allows me to do that. But I share that with you only to say it can happen to the best of us. Unexpected difficulties. We must persevere. Can you only imagine what Brad Keithley goes through? I assume he has pit bulls in his house or Rottweilers when he's broadcasting, and those are at his heels. And
right.
You never see him sweat.
Right. Nipping at his heels the whole time, trying to bite on him. Well, I appreciate it. I think you're right. Grit is something, and I guess it's something that we all have to work on and stick through. So we'll.
I don't know if you could just hear the dog fight in the background. Those are two King Charles Kettler Spaniels that were just growling and going at each other. It's like pit bulls, like a pit in here.
Yeah,
they don't have any cash to throw at them.
They're showing their grit. I did not realize that Chris Story, newspaper headline: Chris Story has dogfighting ring. Anyway,
Michael Vick has inspired me.
Exactly, he is someone to aspire to. All right, final thoughts, Chris Story here before I let you go for today.
I'm excited about today. I think there's going to be grit in each of our lives, and I think it's up to us. It's up to you to make the best of it. I know it sounds colloquial. It's true. Go out there and make the best of today. And when you feel without, go give to somebody else, and you can't help but feel great.
Yeah, absolutely. Helping others is definitely a way to help yourself. I'm fully convinced of that. All right, Chris Story, thank you, my friend, for coming on board. As always, it's a pleasure. Go throw some. I bet 5 on the Tallulah. All right, that's what I'm just saying right now.
Okay,
let me know how that works out. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it, my friend. Folks, we're out of time. We got more coming up tomorrow. Mike Shower and somebody else. Welcome back. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day. Okay. Well, that's it for today, my friends. I think we did it. We are all good. I logged back into Facebook on my browser anyway. So that's happening. So Facebook apparently is back up. So we'll be back tomorrow, and we will see you guys then. Jody says grits are in the cereal aisle. They weren't 25 years ago. Nobody was eating grits in Fairbanks. I mean, it was Fairbanks, All right, we got to go. We'll see you then, my friends. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Good morning.
Buddy, we check podcast.
Welcome.